Yes, the sunlight is what I expected it to be. Glorious. And then it all began. The memories flashed across my mind as I slowly hit the ground. I have the desire, the urge to free my countrymen from the bastards, from the evil. I need to further educate myself. Thus, I have to leave my beloved country, my family, and even my love. It was 16th of June, year 1882, when I arrived in Barcelona, Spain. I was impressed with the country's freedom and liberation. That inspired me to write Amor Patria and Los Viajes for the Diaryong Tagalog. And from Barcelona, I decided to continue my medical studies in Madrid. To keep me occupied and healthy, I practiced my shooting and fencing at the Hall of Arms of Sans y Carbonell. I also met some Filipino and Spanish friends and formed the Círculo Hispano-Filipino. We gathered at Don Pablo Ortega's house and we discussed issues concerning our respective countries. And there, I also met Consuelo Ortega. And on June 25, 1884, at Café Ingles, we gathered to commemorate the triumph of two Indios who won the Spaniards' attention in the Madrigal Exposition of Fine Arts. In that same event, I was chosen to be the main speaker. It was the first time that I expressed my deep revulsion towards the Spanish friars. Then, after years of studying, I finished my medical education in June of 1884. However, because I had no money to pay for my diploma, I was not given a degree. I finished my degree in Philosophy and Letters, 19th of June 1885, and was graded sobresaliente. From Madrid, I decided to continue my studies in Paris and then in Germany to specialize in ophthalmology for the restoration of my mother's eyesight. I became a clinical assistant of Dr. Weckert in Paris. After 4 months in Paris, I decided to move to Heidelberg, Germany. I also went to Leipzig. It was the first time I wrote to a good friend of mine, Signor Ferdinand Blumentritt. He's a noted ethnologist that had a keen interest in analyzing cultures and the Philippines' languages. I moved to Berlin to further gain knowledge in ophthalmology and to observe the political and social conditions of their country. In Berlin, I felt rich in experience, but also faced hardships and difficulties. I came to a point when I only ate once a day to cover all my expenses and even pawn Saturnina's ring because I had no money to pay my lodge. I was extremely discouraged and disappointed that I was at a point of just burning the Noli Me Tangere. And on December of 1887, my good friend, Signor Maximo Viola, insisted to fund the printing of the Noli Me Tangere. The novel was finally printed in March of 1887. This is the first impartial and daring book on the life of the Tagalogs. The government and the Spanish friars will probably fight the book. That is, they will attack it but I confide to God and the truth, and in the people who have seen the sufferings at close range. After the publication of my novel, Senor Viola and I decided to have a grand tour in Europe on May of 1887. We first visited Potsdam, a city in the northeastern Germany. Then, in late Meritz, Bohemia, we were welcomed by Senor Blumentritt. I was overwhelmed with joy as I finally met him. We were pleasantly accepted by his family in their home.
Thank you for you and your wife's hospitality, Senor Blumentritt. We appreciate it so much.
Why, it's our pleasure, Senor Viola. You and Senor Rizal are remarkable men, and I must commend you for that. Well, I think Rizal is the greatest product of the Philippines, and that his rare brilliance appears only every other century. Not only Rizal is the most prominent man of his own people, but the greatest man the Malayan race has ever produced.
After our stay in Late Meritz, we continued our tour and went to Prague, a historic city in the capital of Czechoslovakia. We visited the tomb of Nicholas Copernicus. Then, we visited Vienna, a city in Austria. Then we entered Germany through Salzburg. I also had a superb time in the country of Switzerland. On June 19, 1887, I celebrated my 26th birthday in Geneva, Switzerland, with Senor Viola. We parted ways as I continued my tour to the city of Rome. I admired the splendor and grandeur of Rome, the fine Renaissance architecture of the St. Peter's Dome and St. Peter's Basilica. I had some quick stops to see Turin, Milan, Venice, and Florence, and visited the Roman Forum, the Capitolium, and the Colosseum. In my 5-year stay in the West, I witnessed the stunning beauty of the European lands. Yet, it did not stop me from continuously adoring my native land. I decided to return back to the Philippines. August 5, 1887, I arrived in Manila. 3 days after, Monday morning, aboard the boat Binyan, I sailed to Calamba, passing through the Pasig River. The news of my operation on my mother's eyes spread, and people began visiting my clinic. February 8, 1888, I arrived at Hong Kong. There I was spied by the Spanish authorities. After 3 weeks, I boarded Oceanic and sailed to Japan. How beautiful this country is! I was impressed with the honesty, courtesy, cleanliness, and industry of the Japanese people, the gardens, the women in kimono, but most of all, I was impressed with the beauty of Osei-san. From Yokohama, I went to San Francisco, then to Sacramento, Reno, and finally, New York. America is the land of par excellence of freedom, but only for the whites. I went to London to study and made an annotation of Dr. Antonio de Morgas, Sucesos de las Islas Filipinas. While staying here, I received good and bad news from home. Reverend Father Vicente Garcia was defending my Noli from friars' attacks. However, my fellows in Calamba were facing persecutions, and my brothers-in-law, Mariano Herbosa and Manuel T. Hidalgo, were exiled in Bohol and were denied Christian burial. Thousands of people flocked to the exposition that was set to open on May 6, 1889. The much-awaited event was the unveiling of the Eiffel Tower by French engineer Alexander Eiffel. I had been abroad for more than 5 years. It was not easy living on a scant allowance. I established an impromptu club called the Kidlat, composed of fellow Filipinos. I called it so because they thought of it in a flash, and in a flash it will be gone. I also established the International Association of Filipinologists, inviting all scholars interested in Philippine affairs, with Blumentritt as president. On January 28, 1890, I left for Brussels because of the expensive life in Paris. In Brussels, I became preoccupied in working on El Filibusterismo, and at the same time, contributed articles for the La Solidaridad. This was where I also met Suzanne Petit Jacobi. I was saddened that the Dominican order filed a case against the Colombo residents to retrieve their land property. Pasiano and my brother-in-law, Antonio Lopez and Silvestre Ubaldo, were exiled to Mindoro, and Manuel Hidalgo, for the second time, to Bohol. A letter from Pasiano said that they lost against the Dominicans, but decided to appeal the case to the Supreme Court of Spain. I arrived at Biarritz on February 1891. I courted Nellie, but she didn't accept it. But we remained good friends. On March 29, 1891, the eve of my departure from Paris, I was able to finish the manuscript. In April, I went back to Brussels to focus on my profession as a doctor. On July 5, 1891, I left Brussels for Ghent. There, the F. Mayer van Loo Press in Vianderen Street was where I was able to have my novel published on installment basis. Valentin Ventura provided financial aid. On November 20, 1891, I arrived in Hong Kong. With the help of my friend, Dr. Lorenzo Marquez, a Portuguese physician, I opened the clinic and there operated on my mother's eye. My family was there to visit me. I wrote the Constitution of the Liga Filipina, a civic league of Filipinos. The Constitution was printed in Hong Kong in 1892. I deceived the Spaniards by putting wrong information that it was printed by the London Printing Press. My sister Lucia and I left Hong Kong for Manila on June 21, 1892. We carried a passport or safe conduct issued by the Spanish Consul General in Hong Kong. June 26, when we returned to Manila, a secret case was filed against me for anti-religious and anti-patriotic agitation. I was deported to one of the islands in the south. July 17, 1892 was the start of my 4-year exile in Dapitan. Life in Dapitan was generally peaceful. Members of my family, my mother, sisters, and nephews were there too. I opened a clinic to practice my profession, which mostly catered to my poor kababayans. The death of Leonor Rivera left my heart deeply wounded and depressed. The coming of Josephine brought hope to my depressed heart. Since no priest would marry us, Josephine and I held hands together and married ourselves before the eyes of God. In the early 1896, Josephine had given birth to a premature child whom we called Francisco, but he also died after several hours. Dr. Pio Valenzuela has informed me about the Katipunan movement. I told him I was against the plan of putting the country under a bloody revolution. The people were not ready for a revolution, and arms and funds must first be collected before starting a revolution. And I did not wish to be rescued, for I had given my word to the Spanish authorities. I volunteered my service as a military doctor. I got accepted and went to Manila to board the steamer for Cuba. The steamer España arrived in Manila Bay, August 6, 1896. Unfortunately, the ship that would have brought me to Barcelona via Cuba had left the previous day, so I was transferred to the Spanish cruiser Castilla, and there stayed for almost a month. From Castilla, I was transferred to Isla de Panay. A passenger warned me about an arrest from the Spanish authorities. The following day, September 30, the captain detained me inside the cabin until we reached Barcelona. After 3 days in Spain, I went back to Manila. In Manila, I was brought to Fort Santiago. I knew I was facing the toughest trial of my life.